Okay. Awesome. All right. I'll share my screen. How's everyone doing in general?
Good.
Very good.
Okay. All right. So my screen is probably super small. Let me try to make it bigger. Actually, I'm going to change my share. I'll just share the window itself. All right, so hopefully you can see the screen okay.
Yep.
All right, so we've got a set of feedback from 100 folks. We've now sort of disabled the ability to add more input sort of into it, which is good. We've got a nice sample of 100 people that have contributed, and a lot of voting actually happened. So that was great to have that discourse sort of back and forth. We got really a large number of people that have voted on over 50 things, which is really, really great. As things are added, I do notice that there's sort of a trail of, maybe if someone just added it, maybe there's only a couple of votes that have been provided for a single item. Some of the early ones probably got more exposure across the board. And, definitely this is kind of the first time we've actually tried to use this in full practice. And so there's definitely some learnings I think that we'll get from the outcome of this process. So this is certainly still an experiment. And, there's parts of this that I don't completely understand exactly the logic of how the information was presented, but we will try to interpret this together. So if we look at the overview, exactly how things were grouped is a little bit unclear to me on some things, but there's some nice sentiment. Actually, the tool allows us to be able to sort of see sort of this set of grouping.
Each of those dots is a question. Is that what, or a statement?
Yeah, each of these is a statement. It's unclear.
What's the one way far on the right, just out of curiosity?
Yeah.
Does that mean it was highly divisive? Like, what does it mean when they're clumped together on the left and when they're on the right?
I don't know if I fully understand that.
Yeah, it looks like Group A was 100% and Group B was 82% the other way.
Yeah, there is this group of A which contributed, or is a grouping of one person. That's how I interpret that. And so that kind of skews a lot of this into grouping. So if we look at the table below, and is this large enough for you folks? Can you guys see it okay?
Yeah.
Cool. I can drive up my font if needed. But so my understanding is that there's sort of this overall sentiment, and there's sort of percent agreed, and then this, 82 is the combination of this A group and B group. So it seems like there was one dissenter that was separated from a grouping of this other 81 folks, is sort of how I would interpret this. And so in general, there was out of the whole grouping, 80% of folks said that for this first statement, that a Catalyst Circle rep can promote a personal proposal in a circle forum. So 80% of people are saying, no, we can't do that. Sort of how I would interpret this data. So for clarity, for me, I've been trying to gravitate toward this overall versus necessarily trying to pick apart each of these grouping and necessarily clearly, understanding what these groupings mean. But, the fact that there's only one person that has voted this way is, it's an interesting artifact. We have a group of one, which to me was probably an outlier. And for the most part, I would consider throwing that out. If it's truly a group of one. If it was like, okay, 50% on each side, then we would probably have to balance each of these groups differently. And it was suggested in the tool that we input not only the positive statements, but also, altering sort of sentiments. And so we have folks can do this and not do this sort of effect, but we wanted to have differences of opinion. Certainly it was sort of the instruction for inputting into the tool. So we did have a variety of questions asked in different ways. And so there's definitely the concept of negatives and double negatives of, we don't agree that you should not do this, kind of situations. And so I think we'll have to tease out a little bit of the meaning of some of the questions and the outcomes of this, just because of how they were positioned, in the survey itself. And so there'll be a little bit of work to juice that out, get some meaning from that. And so, here we have a majority of people saying, no, we don't want to do this. Yes, we should do this. If I'm looking at this overall column here. So again, there's a couple of opinion groups. Again, this is sort of this group of one. And then we have 80 people. And then there's sort of this mix of a percentage of folks that were sort of in between, where things were a little bit less decisive. And this is sort of how I'm interpreting this. The graph, to me, I don't completely understand the value of this. This is another situation where you can select a point on the graph. And I think it actually calls out that says, hey, this statement is too vague. So there's, not much value out of this particular data point. But if we saw these various camps that are sort of sitting in specific areas, it might be a little bit more valuable. Sort of as I've looked at this, and you can do things like actually outline groups and kind of capture sentiment is sort of how I would interpret how this tool could be used. But to me, probably the most valuable outcome of this tool is sort of understanding each statement and then understanding the overall, were people for or against it. And that's kind of where, I think I would probably focus our attention on this. And I don't know how much you folks have had an opportunity to explore this report. Have you folks spent some time in here, or is this fresh for you folks?
I looked at it a little bit.
To be honest, from my end, Harris, I think you probably sent this to us last time, but I just didn't realize I could see the back end results as much as the front end. So that's what I've been using. So it's a little bit new. It's new to me from what we looked at last time when we went through it.
No, that's totally fair. There's a lot of information here. So I'm glad we got the word out. I'm glad we were able to get, a number of people to participate in this. And so the idea is that we could take this information, come up with some potential rules of how we would accept or not accept or summarize sort of the outcome of this. And then we could potentially bring that into an update at a different time, and or we can query the community for more insights in a separate after town hall that we can schedule if we want more opinion. we also can make the determination if we think we have enough information to at least create an initial document. I think these are some of the questions that we should deliberate on a bit, try to make some conclusions and assumptions of what we'd like to do with this data. All right, so I'll dive in a little bit more in the data. So we can go by the actual IDs themselves. So you have the ability to sort of look at all the statements. And so we have 200 or so specific statements that have been 209 that have been input. There's definitely some cases where a comment was made and then only one person voted, right? So I think we could potentially look at what is the minimum number of votes that we should consider. And then if it's below a threshold, potentially say we don't have enough data, or we can evaluate each statement and try to make some decision if that's valid.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, so I have a question. Why we are closing this off? Because for one thing, it's a very short period of time, and I was of the opinion that we were going to keep it for a longer time for people to respond. The second thing is, this is so far been put only in English, and it would have been better to put it in a couple of the other regional languages, because there are people in the other regions who are not conversant to answer these things in English. So it would have been, it is better to do this again in Spanish, in maybe Portuguese, in maybe the languages where the town halls are there, the Japanese, the Vietnamese, the Indonesian, and so on, because a lot of these people do not have the ability to answer these questions in English or to understand it in English, and it would not be fair to expect them to participate without understanding. So as it stands right now, it's been done in a short space of time, primarily for an English-speaking audience, which really doesn't capture the entire essence of either the Catalyst community or the overall Cardano community.
You feel like
Sorry
you
for the
didn't have enough time
disturbance, my
to
friend.
post it?
Sorry for the disturbance. I can repeat it again if you can't hear.
Do you feel like you didn't have enough time to post it in places? Have you done that?
It's just too short, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or I think it's been about 2 weeks. It's too short. I did post it in
That
some
wasn't my
places.
question. My question
Yeah,
is like,
I
have you-
did post it. Yeah, I did post it about 2 days back in Twitter, because I saw that it was closing so soon. Regarding the town halls, I've shared it in my town hall, and you said you had already shared it in the Eastern. But regarding the language side, it's still only in English. I think it should be in the other languages as well, to give an overall perspective from the both the Catalyst, which is a smaller subgroup of the overall Cardano community.
So we did talk last time. We had a long discussion about this, and then a follow-up about the timing of it so that we could keep things going. This is what I said to you also directly.
Yeah, it's still too
So
short. I mean, it's still too. I mean, two to 3 weeks.
what is
too
your
short.
definition of too short or too long?
I would define a sufficient amount of time for the people who don't participate in town hall. So a minimum of 4 weeks, even going up to 6 to 8 weeks in multiple languages to reach the multiple groups of constituents, not only English speaking, not only I mean, people who would be able to understand these questions, but they should be put into the different languages if you want to capture a global perspective. Because we have already got Spanish speaking and Portuguese speaking areas, we have Swahili speaking areas, we have people who communicate only in Indonesian, only in Vietnamese, only in Japanese, and they don't communicate in English, so they are not going to participate.
So
Even if it was posted in those locations, they would.
To the timing
Yeah.
part and the first part, those people who have seen that survey that you posted 2 days ago will not have any more time than the people who saw it when it was posted 2 weeks
Agreed.
ago. It's the same
Agreed,
amount of
agreed,
time.
agreed.
So,
Agreed.
so in that sense, I think it's maybe, we needed to start a little earlier in posting the thing to the timing perspective, because there's leaving something open for a month doesn't necessarily make people any more likely. And in fact, urgency will not kick in till closer to the end anyway. So
Possibly, but
on
still,
that note,
yeah, possibly.
yeah,
I don't disagree with you on that, but at the same time, more time would be more probability that people who didn't see it could come and see it. I'm not saying that I'm
if
not
it's
saying that
posted
they
regularly, yeah. I agree with
I'm
that.
not
if
saying
it's
they
posted.
necessarily would, but maybe they would have a better chance. That's what I'm saying. And
The
as for
second
the
part,
language,
the second part to
Yeah.
the language, people are submitting these themselves. So, people are submitting them and reading them according to, these aren't like things that we put out entirely. This is a request for the community's feedback. So, these are questions that the community is posting and then responding to. So, and on an ongoing basis. So, as a response to that, I mean, I opened to other people on this call as well, but as a response to that, this is an initial gathering of feedback and information so that we can get consensus on basic things for the conduct of the circle. So if
Correct.
the
Correct.
requirement is that it be in every language, I think that's a little bit complicated for something that is ongoing when people can be
what I might
continuously
suggest,
adding to it.
what I might suggest is, let's say there were 100 questions here, and if we wanted to get a complete picture as to what the community wanted, we could get those 100 questions put into the main languages and put as part of the survey, the same survey or a different survey, or the Spanish, we can call it the Spanish version of this survey or the Portuguese version of the survey, so that those people who do not communicate in English do have the chance to participate in the survey. So I understand your point that the community members have posted it in English, but since you're looking at it from a larger perspective, any census is done in all languages that the community participates in. So doing it only in English doesn't really achieve the purpose of getting a community opinion. It gets only one part of the community.
Timing wise, this would have been helpful to have been brought up and thought about as we sent the thing out, rather than following the date of its closing. So not wanting to influence this too much, I'll just like open it to everyone else for feedback. But my sentiment here is like, I guess there's an opportunity to do that. Certainly we want it to be as inclusive as possible. And certainly if that is preventing people from giving feedback, then it should definitely be addressed. My sentiment is more to the active distribution of the thing and the encouragement of the completion of it. So that's the position I'm coming from. So maybe I'll just pause there and let anyone else weigh in who wants to.
I think the tool itself makes it very hard to do multiple languages because anybody can add a statement, and then who's going to translate that new statement into all the different platforms? So it may be better to start with a blank slate for each language and let the community start to fill in that language their thoughts on codes of conduct and things, and then see how each community falls out. But I agree that it's kind of late now. So, and this is also not to create something set in stone. It's to create an initial version of something to get feedback from the community. So it can start as a stepping point, and then we can start to translate those and start to get more feedback. So I think it's going to be an ongoing process. So I agree with, I'm hearing some sentiment that we shouldn't stop this process now and make sure we get all the languages in place. We should start and do something, at least an initial version, understanding that it's not the final one, and maybe it'll never be a final one as we keep evolving and developing this thing. But
that's a big part of it. It's going to be a living document, right, and a living conversation. So
Yeah, I think before we, I think we should is the languages that the breakout rooms are conducted in the town halls, the respective regional town halls, to have there who will be willing to help out with the translation part, to put it to them before any finalization is done on what goes into any document, because that way all the communities will feel included. I mean, since I came here on the basis of inclusivity, I think it's good to get all the communities' perspectives in the languages that they're used to. So my personal idea of getting the best is to have the Spanish and Portuguese and the Japanese, Vietnamese and Indonesian and Chinese, and on the other side, the Swahili, and which I think they have Swahili and Arabic as the languages they have other than English. South Asia, of course, it's only in English. We don't have any regional languages so far. I think Pacific is also only in English. So maybe if we can have a second version of this going out in those languages and capture their opinions before going into any finalization of which questions we are taking up and putting into a document, that will be ideal.
Yeah, I'll just kind of jump in a bit on that. So yeah, we do need to get an initial version out. So if we do produce a draft document, I think my intention is that we would share that document with the community, and it's at that point that Dimitri, we could have a version that could be translated and then distributed in any number of languages that you think is appropriate. We certainly could take that approach, but we need to kind of start somewhere, and we need to sort of set these guidelines.
Agreed, Haris. But wouldn't you think that publish, okay, what you're saying is take the results of the survey, make it into a document, and translate the document. I'm saying put the survey itself, going a step upstream, to put the survey itself before going into the document stage. Get the survey also to the people in those languages, not to give them the finished product, but let them participate in the, as much as the survey was done for the English, the survey to be done in those other languages too.
Yeah, I do think inclusivity is certainly a goal that we need to work towards. I would, the proposals themselves are currently in English right now, and a lot of the systems, is currently in English, and I think that is probably a bigger priority to translate at some point, and I think it's something that will need to be addressed. Right now we're just trying to set some guardrails to make sure that we're working in the best possible manner as a circle to validate our role. And so I first of all, I don't know if this tool accommodates multiple languages. I don't believe it's internationalized. I don't know if it has that support. So while the questions might be posed in a specific language, it's very possible the buttons would still say yes or no, or might not accommodate that specific thing. And so then we'd have to go out and find the right survey tool. We were just trying to use this to get a temperature of, what are people interested in, what is important, what is not important. I think we've got at least a starting base of significant feedback. And granted, is not as widely inclusive as it could be, but I think it's a good place for us to start. So that's my opinion. Well, welcome, Mercy. How are you?
See.
I'm very well. Thanks. Thanks, Harry. Hi, everyone.
And I personally believe that for people to be effective in participating in the survey, they should be aware of what the circle is, have watched circle meetings or read the minutes or things. And as far as I'm aware, all of those are in English. So if they are coming from places that don't understand or speak English, it may be very difficult for them to even know what the issues are, or what the circle does, or how that's even working. So I don't know how informed their opinions will be, and whether it's just going to add a bunch of noise or not. So I think there is a greater root issue that we're only doing a lot of our work, this from Catalyst to Idea Scale to the circle meetings, the notes, everything is in English. And we don't have like ongoing translations for all of these materials happening, which puts like non-English speaking places at a huge disadvantage when trying to participate in this. And I really hope that we can solve that. But yeah, I don't know if the survey itself is going to move that needle a whole bunch if they're not even aware of what the circle does, because they can't view and watch the meetings.
Yeah, no, I definitely definitely agree. You know, we need to ultimately get to a place where we have more inclusivity. So I definitely applaud your direction, Dimitri. But for us to stay focused and try to get a first version out, I would propose that we run with the data that we have. As far as the time frame is concerned, you know, I felt like we had ample time. You know, we often put demands on the community to vote within a 2-week time frame. You know, it's not unreasonable to ask for just a quick survey for a few points of feedback, and we've gotten, you know, almost 6,000 points of feedback, which is pretty significant, and at least is a leading indicator for us to go into maybe draft. The other alternative, Dimitri, if there are forums that are out there, and I don't track all the town halls that are ongoing, but if there's after town halls in each of these respective regions in specific languages, you know, the next step might be to have that brainstorm of what the circle should and should not do as in and after town hall in these various forums. That might be another suggestion if we want to go to that next level of inclusivity. So do we have a sense of what the coverage is of languages in these other town halls? Are they in English or are they in specific languages?
So I gave this survey to Lynn a couple weeks ago to send out. It was the Friday after our meeting, and for Eastern Town Hall, and he did that. And I asked him this question, and he said that it's conducted in English, and then they have breakouts in different languages. But for the most part, the people who are there can speak and read English very well, and so he didn't feel like that was going to be a big challenge there, and that was done. So
Actually,
go ahead. What are you saying?
Dimitri? Oh, he's gone. Okay.
So I think there's some amount of that. If we want to reach, and I don't know what everyone else has done here, so if this has already been done, then great. But I'm gonna actually be in Latin American Town Hall today, just to talk a little bit about what my role does. They asked me to come talk. So if we want to leave it open for another day or two, I could really like doubly promote that there, and I could ask this question there too. That would be something that we could do to try to just extend it a little bit more. I think that's maybe fair, to have an extra day or two. So that's an offer. If that's something that you guys would agree on, that is something I can totally do.
Yeah,
I think go ahead.
I think it's great. Was it already promoted in Latin American Town Hall already, or?
I don't know the answer to that question, but certainly across a lot of the channels. So
Okay, yeah. All right, I would propose that we, process the data that we have, and not necessarily open it back up. I mean, it's super easy to just turn it back on and off, but then we just have more data, and we have to catch up with new insights and new information. So that's why I'm a fan of closing it, which is sort of what we agreed upon in our last discussion. So is everyone in favor of keeping the data locked and we process the data that we have right now? So maybe with voting, okay. We got one thumbs up, two.
I'll give it a thumbs up. I don't know how much, I mean, in this case, it might be nice to have it one more place, but I also can see that will really, I don't know how much of a dramatic difference it would make if 5 or 10 more people put into it if they wanted to, but I also see the value of moving forward with this here and evaluating it. Since there's a lot and it's spread out and it's generally pretty close together as far as response. We don't have any crazy outliers per the dots, so maybe this is a good start. And then maybe an alternative would be inviting people today to the after town hall, that we're letting them know that we're doing this project and inviting that kind of a thing. So I can also ask the language question. So I think maybe we can have a good outcome of this particular conversation that Dimitri has raised and try to involve more groups in the process as it's ongoing.
Okay. Peter, did you have a specific opinion or?
I didn't know I had a vote, but I think getting a proof of concept makes sense and getting the ball rolling as well. I think that yeah, I think the undertaking of doing a survey across a lot of languages, I was thinking about that sitting here, and it seems a lot of in-between work to like all the different languages to collect their information, then translate it and provide that to have that kind of live in a survey type environment. Yeah, the tool that would require this probably isn't going to be it.
Yeah, Dimitri, since you've done a lot with language and language translation, I've certainly built internationalized interfaces in the past, but and there's certainly a lot of challenges. But is it outlandish to consider that people might use something like a Google Translate? Is that effective for people to translate the message in their browser?
I've done work in Google Translate. I've also done work with humans. So humans are, of course, far more effective than Google Translate. But Google Translate can get the job done in a situation like this where money doesn't need to be necessarily spent. So if you were to say Google Translate can get a accuracy of 60 to 70%, whereas humans will get 95 to 100%. So of course, humans better, but getting humans involved will mean costs and whatnot. So I was just thinking, if there are 100 questions, translating 100 questions will cost far less using Google Translate versus getting a human to translate into each of the languages. So what I would do in such a situation where I didn't have a fund to do it is that I would use Google Translate to do the work, have some sort of time cost for doing that on Google Translate, and then having some sort of a human fund, like a budget for a human to proofread that. And then proofreading is where he will check and see if there are any improvements that can be made from what has been done in the Google Translate. So volume-wise, 100 questions for each of the language. I mean, that's not even a project. That's like a micro project compared to the work that we typically do. So yeah. I mean, doing the work is not a difficult thing. So that's.
I'm not asking for a translation service. What I'm asking is, there's plugins that you can just add Google Translate, and when you load a page in another language, it automatically translates it. Is that good enough to have captured the opinions of people globally? Like, are these people in these groups already doing that, I guess is my question.
I couldn't say whether the people are doing it, because the survey itself, whether they did it into their own language, as far as I know, the answer would be no, but I could be wrong.
How do you know that? Have you asked
I couldn't say that because I haven't got any particular feedback, or nor have I seen it that it's been put into a different language. But I know the plugin you're talking about, where when you choose the language, it changes the whole thing. But I don't think that could be done in the survey itself, because the survey is like not a static page. If it was a static page, it could be done. But since you're asking for people to vote on something, it's some sort of a script of some sort. So it has to be manually entered. The text has to be manually entered.
So in my use, if I go to a German website, Google automatically in Chrome, assuming that users are using Chrome or some modern browser, that it will say, hey, this is in German, do you want me to translate? And I'll say yes, and then it's in English. It's automatically translated.
Yeah, that's because it's a page. It's a static page. It's not a script like the surveys. Now, if you try to do the same thing in a survey,
If I may, the way this tool is designed, it's not really conducive to translating. Like these 100 questions came from the community, and as they interact, they'll add more and more. So I think the more effective tool or use of this tool is to create a statement in the language to say, here's a discussion about code of conduct, and here's 3 or 4 seed questions, and then let that community add their own questions and have that conversation with each other, rather than trying to, because each community will have new statements, and then do we translate those back into English and put them up?
I think that the 100 questions could easily be put into the languages.
But it's not 100 questions that we created. And then as people interact
Yeah, we
in
would.
the language tools, they'll create new questions, and there may be 300 that they create. And then what do you do with those? Do you translate those to all languages and back to English? And so my thought is we run these surveys if we want. There's an opportunity here to leverage Dumpling's connection with the Cardano Foundation, and particularly the ambassadors. And if you look at this meetup link, it shows all the meetups that are run by Cardano ambassadors around the world. And they're in a number of countries. And if they get passionate about supporting this governance thing, they could create these surveys themselves in their home language and then report back. And we could have all this decentralized effort being done by the Cardano ambassadors to help this process. So I think that's an opportunity that we can definitely leverage rather than trying to maintain like this coordinated translation service across all these languages.
Yeah, the translation I'm referring to is not of the finished document. It is where each question is available to anyone to respond as participant in the survey. So it would be, like you said, putting it back into English, whatever. If they come up with a new statement, to put that back into English would also need to happen.
Mercy, you have a question or your hand raised?
It's just a comment, and I think that Dimitri knows my position on this in terms of, making some of these things as inclusive as possible. And I think that Nori pretty much said it better than I would have, in the sense that, we need something, like something, let's say an MVP to start working. And then a lot of these things, once it goes out into the community, people take responsibility in terms of if it needs to be translated further into, into French or to, whatever other languages. So I think that at this point, I am a bit reluctant for us to, start making it as, however we want to frame that. I think for now, let's start with something, and then let's, as time goes on, it could snowball, and then people take responsibility, and that's decentralization. And yeah, that is what I feel at this point. I think that we need something very, very quick, very nimble, very agile to just work with for now.
Okay, I think we have consensus and we agree that we're going to run with the data that we have, and we'll move on. Sound good? Okay, cool. All right. Someone was sharing their screen. I don't know who was doing that before, translating into Japanese and all these other languages. Who was doing that? Okay, yeah, Peter, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It will translate.
Grab
right?
the extension that you were talking about and just pulled it into a browser, then loaded the survey, and yeah, live just does it right as you scroll.
Yeah.
So
and it was updating the questions as well, right?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. Yeah. So I think there's free tools that are available for the world. Okay, so I'll start sharing my screen again. And so I guess the next direction I might propose that we discuss is what is the criteria that we would accept this input, and so we can kind of go into that a little bit more here. Give me 1 second. Way too many windows. Okay, so we've got this back now. Sorry, I'm just manipulating my screen here. Okay, so if we look at the outcome that we have here for each of the questions, so maybe we can take a little bit of a sample and kind of look at some of these, and we can try to make some decisions on them. So one of the things we can sort by is sort of the number of votes. And so if we look at the results, and the sequence that were entered is pretty meaningless in general. So it's we can see in this first question, statement number 9, that there were 61 people that voted on this. And so to me, that's a pretty decent size sample, and would give us enough insight on this particular item. So in theory, we could actually take this list of 200, we could reduce it down and get it to maybe 100 or so that at least has meaningful data attached to it. The other thing we could do is we could, deduplicate some of these questions, because there is duplication in some of these where we have the same question asked in the positive and the same question asked in a negative version. And the result is probably the same thing, that people don't want us to do this thing, right? Even though it was asked 2 different ways. So that is another way we can take this list and squish it down into 100 or 50 questions. Theoretically, we could throw that back in another survey and put it through the washing machine again and get another set of opinions and clarification and broaden it. So we can rinse and repeat as often as we think is necessary. I'm certainly a fan of trying to get us to deduplicate some of the data, get inference in terms of what we think is the opinion of these 100 people, condense that down to say, here's what we do, here's what we don't do, based on the opinion of 100 people, right? And putting that into some kind of spreadsheet. And so, ideally throwing out, the one-off opinion. So if we can set some boundaries of what we think is helpful in analyzing this data, I think that would be kind of a next step. And then we can go through the act of processing those questions and data. And I'm certainly happy to take a very active role in that, and trying to go through this deduplication process. Certainly happy to share that amongst the group here as well. As we
If you can scroll up to the circles just above this, it might be interesting to look at the questions that are in that inner circle, because I think that's the one with the highest levels of consensus amongst all the participants. And then you have the other circles getting further and further out into different sentiments. But the ones that are just in that inner circle, if I'm reading this graph right, those are the ones that most people kind of aligned around. And the ones at the very middle are the ones that everybody voted yes or no.
Yeah, I believe that you're right. These are the ones that are that have consensus. That sounds correct. And then these would be outliers, I guess. So if we look at this one, a current circle rep should not be allowed to promote their own social media profiles.
We had 45, 34, 19. That's pretty spread out.
That's a tough one. Because are your channels are your like Discord names and stuff like that, right? If that's how you're communicating, but
it's kind of a vague question, I guess. I think I definitely made up some just to seed it, to try to get opinions. Some of the things that I thought, some of the other ones, but the intent is that there's a bunch of people that added their own questions as well, and so that's to me potentially more valuable. So we probably need to kind of take like, okay, these ones are actually crystal clear, like, yeah, that's a no, we should not do these things. And then there's going to be a set that are vague, where it's like, okay, it's sort of in between, you know. So I think, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the idea of reducing redundancy is really, really good, because that's a lot of people that I sent it to were like, half of this kind of sounds like the other half of it. I'm like, yeah, this what happens when people, so that'll be really good to see the themes emerge from the consolidating of the questions.
Great. Yeah, no, I think it's a good place. So yeah, the intent of this tool, I think, is to see where there's groupings and patterns and consensus. So I think this is what it's good for sure. So if we look at quantity of votes, you know, we got a good number of opinions. You know, is there a threshold that we think is important? Like, it has to be greater than 10. Is there at least any specific metrics we want to throw at it, where, okay, it's got to be more than 10 people have voted? And then do we have any confidence on our initial list? Like, okay, if it's greater than 50% that agree with it, that would be considered an opinion? Or is it 60%, 70%? You know, are we able to filter the data in a particular way where we can define this initial list?
What are you thinking is going to happen to the line, the data when it, like, so a statement here, for example, this should be able to happen, this shouldn't be able to happen. Let's say, just using the criteria you just mentioned, at least 10 people have answered it, and there's 70% consensus on it. So we have a list of those statements. They then, or will that, I'm just trying to understand what our outcome is. Is that going to be that we have a list of those things and we take that into a discussion in an after town hall, and we say, these are some of the key things that have come back with minimum response required and general consensus? And then we can also say, these are the things that have come back and have minimum requirement, but we're split. What do you guys think, kind of thing? Where do you see the next 2 or 3 stages of this process being? Does that after town hall then lead into the drafting? What's your feeling?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking along those lines in terms of, you know, synthesizing, and we could present the overall sentiment. You know, we can also maybe start with a brainstorm and leave it wide open, so we're not necessarily feeding that, and then maybe ending the after town hall with a bit of, okay, so here's kind of what we found based on this list of 100 people that, or this group of 100 people that contributed so far. And that we might have alignment of what the discussion was ahead of that. That would be one possible approach. Does that make sense? We also could just present it. I mean, everyone would be like, oh yeah, that looks great. But we do want to sort of keep it open-ended at some level, right? If we're going to be helpful in this after town hall experience. So what is our expectation in an after town hall? Okay, are we going to get 20 people? Is that going to help add to the discussion, or is it better to maybe refine this, send out another survey of that consolidated list? I don't know. We have a couple ways we could do this. Anyone else have feedback or thoughts on that approach, or an approach, or other approaches?
You could ask people at the breakout at after town hall what they would like to see as next steps as well, just to get some input on the process itself from the community.
That's cool. I think a community gathering is sort of like expected here. We've been talking about it for a while, and here and there I get questions like, where was the after town hall for the code of conduct? I'm like, we did the survey instead, it's coming, kind of a thing. And so I think it does make sense that we would gather together and we would well promote the opportunity across. So maybe it would be like 2 weeks from now. So we have time to promote that we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And then we can say, we're going to sort of present these ideas and hear any ideas that didn't make it onto this list so people can contribute to it. So we don't have people saying the same stuff that we've already gathered here any more than briefly like, good, I'm glad to see that there. And then we could ask for input on process. That might be that's one way. I think a get together on this would be good at this point since we've circulated this and it's been talked about.
Okay. Can we then decide, I guess, at this point that we'll do the after town hall on Wednesday, the 18th? Is that cool? And we'll start to circulate that. All right.
Sounds good.
And we'll try to synthesize the data that we have. So I certainly will volunteer to help synthesize. Is there anyone else here that can help me with that? Or I can take a first pass and get your feedback.
Yeah, I'm happy to help out too. I'm wondering if there's a way to remove some of, like group A1 is totally making some of these, the tool options useless. Like,
Yeah.
like if you try to sort by group consensus or whatever that thing is called, group informed consensus, it skews that so far it's useless. Percent agreed, it makes any of these percent disagreed, agreed passed because that one person of one is 100%. And it skews all of these out. So it would be nice if we could at least filter so that we don't see that one and see what the results look like. Because it looks like somebody went in and was just trying to do something. I don't know if anybody actually represents these views, but maybe they do. But it's a group of one. And
yeah, there's definitely some pretty pretty obscure statements that were made and then people voted on. It's like, yeah, this is I'll try to find an actual example, but yeah, it was pretty funny. Like, these questions are too vague, right? Oh yeah, one person said 100%. Yeah, so I mean, that's just an outlier and we can throw that out in my estimation. Okay, so again, I wish I could just export this data and then we could filter in a spreadsheet and manipulate it a little better. I've not found a direct way to do that, but in a copy paste fashion, I've created this spreadsheet, which at least has the questions, and potentially we could, start forming alignment. We can have this as a shared document. I can share this with you, Nori, and share this with the whole circle if people want to contribute to it. But ideally, we would start to, I guess, tag each one and say, okay, this is a duplicate. This has this amount of percentage of, or this number of votes. We can start doing that kind of grouping and adding attributes to each one of these questions. So we'll actually go through a data processing exercise, and then with that attribution and deduplication, then I think we can arrive at an initial set, and we can take that and then summarize that in the workshop or the after town hall in a few weeks.
That is an annoying copy paste task that you did.
yes.
Really
That
annoying.
was super annoying.
Yes, yeah. But that way we're sort of looking at each one independently and, making some call to it, categorizing it potentially. And that allows us to sort of create sort of informed input into what ultimately is, here's what we do, here's what we don't do. And then that is input into essentially a legal document that gets drafted. And then that is then shared with the community at some point. And so we would do the synthesis, have that insight, share that with the community, have that discussion, confirm any last thoughts. And that could be carried into multiple town halls. Sort of that, this, you know, the data that we found related to it. And I would expect probably there's some, you know, reports or whatever that we can generate out of this data that could be shared across the board. So does that seem like a reasonable approach?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'll take the action of sort of making a little bit better sense of this spreadsheet, and then I'll share the spreadsheet with the group. You know, Nori and I'm happy to have a breakout, maybe talk a little bit more on how to filter and process the data. And I'll certainly open it up to the rest of the circle if there's other folks that want to participate in that.
Cool. I will take the after town hall announcement. So we're good to start talking about it for the 18th. So I can talk about it tonight. Like we can
Great.
talk about some different places as a beginning and let people know that we're going to compile and refine this data so it's digestible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. So do we want to look at the criteria? Because ideally it's going to be much easier if we throw out data if it doesn't make sense. You know, I think there's a matching of the positive and negative and making sure that we have consensus. Ideally, we throw out anything that's less than 10. Would you guys agree with that approach?
Less than 10 votes.
Yeah.
I think
It has
that's
to be
good.
10 or more. And then, and we could bucket these things too. So I like the notion of 70% consensus or higher as something solid. If there's something that's been voted on that's really contentious, you know, we can keep that data. You know, if it's like 50-50, then maybe we address those in the after town hall.
Yeah, and I think it also have them included. There might be some of the best information in that stuff, honestly, where there's real division, because that has the opportunity to really cause polarization later on, I would think.
Mhm.
So I think definitely those should be addressed and looked at.
Okay. Maybe let's look at a sample of that. So we can do by number of votes. I don't quite know what, I guess past is they didn't answer the question. So if we look at percent agreed,
So
again, we use fun little outlier, I guess.
it skews it because you see that one 204 as being the highest most agreed, but it only actually got 4 total votes.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. So the way I interpret this is it's actually 3. This is the total, right? And then this is like one person said yes, and then
so even less, 3 total votes.
I don't quite know how to interpret this one. So what is this B group? I guess they also said yes.
Yeah, but only 2 people in the B group said yes.
What put someone in the A group or the B group? That's what I've been trying to figure out. If we don't know, it's okay.
It's the AI that kind of analyzes the sentiment, and one person was way opposite everything on purpose, and so it created a group of 1, which is what's creating this. If there's a way to filter that out, that would be amazing. But I'm looking at the moderate and it looks like it's only by question, not by participant, so it may be hard.
Okay, so the A group, normally, if it were more balanced, there'd be an A group and a B group, and you'd be able to see that those groups highly disagree with each other.
Mhm.
But because only one person highly disagreed, there's this A, then that's what the 1 is next to the A and the 81 is next to the B.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's possible somebody just went in, was being a contrarian and just said the opposite of common sense or whatever
yeah.
the sentiment was. But I do, I mean, you're looking at the questions and you don't really have the view of the wider perspective. So I don't know exactly how they would do that, but I mean, it's possible there's just a person with a totally separate opinion.
Yeah.
But
Wonder
to
if
me,
It's been confusing me for a bit here.
Yeah, if we could filter out that single A, I wonder if a different split of groups would show, because that would be interesting if there was like a 30-60 kind of split between the votes rather than 99-1 as the two groups.
yeah, I'm not seeing a ton of tools within this interface. So, you know, this is provided. It's sort of freeware. It's sort of hosted by a service, and we don't have a lot of controls to it. So my estimation is that any finagling we'll have to do with the data, which should probably be in the spreadsheet. But so I think once we get it to a place where we can start filtering and sorting, which is certainly my objective, that we'll be able to do those kind of adjustments and filter some of it out. But I don't think within the tool there's the ability to do that separation at this point, that I've seen anyway. Yeah, because it would be great to just export to a CSV or some spreadsheet, and then we can have at it and do filtering a lot easier. But I may reach out to their support if there is one to sort of see if there's a way to do an export.
It's created and maintained by the Computational Democracy Project, and it is open source. So they have you can actually set up your own Pol.is servers.
Yep.
It's kind of bizarre. Like any kind of time you extract data, you want to be able to export it. It's kind of bizarre that it doesn't have that function, because
Yeah, I kind of assumed that it was there, and just when I was looking for it, I didn't really see that option. So yeah, I'll keep digging because I think that's a much simpler, straightforward way. But I mean, 200 records is not unsurmountable to.
Yeah, there must be, because it looks like they're pulling other Pol.is polls into Jupyter notebooks to do analysis and computation on the data.
Okay. Yeah, there is a backend database here somewhere. I just don't know if we have access to it. At least in the free version, since we're not hosting this ourselves. But. Okay, cool. Any other parameters we think we should filter on? So number of votes. Are we okay with 70% and greater as being a positive, that yes, there is agreement? Is that fair? And then we'll probably bucket the 50 to 70% as a different set of results, or 40 to 70%.
I'm wondering if, since this is sort of an open source project, etc., if they have some guidelines in interpretation of data. Do they have anything like that?
It's possible. I haven't dug that deep into sort of all of its capabilities, but
right.
And again, this is the first real survey that we've attempted with this. I know. I mean, well, we did publish one other survey as part of Catalyst, but certainly this is the first time I've driven this, so there's certainly some learning curve that we're going through. But it's certainly something that I had looked at, it done some slight evaluation, and I thought this was a great use case to try to put it to work.
it's good. People liked it. It was fun.
Nice.
Or people who talked to me about it anyway liked it.
That's awesome. That was great. Okay.
It is really cool to be able to add your own questions to something, right? I think that's really neat.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
powerful that we're not just feeding, here's the 3 questions you get to respond to. Yeah, it's beautiful. All right, anything else that we should discuss? I think we have a few takeaways. We've got some agreement on when. We have some agreement on the approach that we're looking to take in terms of the after town hall. Certainly some work to be done in terms of massaging the data. But other than that, anything else you folks want to work on or discuss?
I just posted some links to the computational democracy project, and they have some documentation there on analysis, and there's even a contact us link I saw for if you need help with analysis.
Nice. No, thank you for that. Yeah, I have to believe it's probably an export somewhere.
Somehow, yeah. Or maybe they can export it for us. But
Yeah, maybe we just ask nicely, they'll hook us up. Okay.
Awesome.
Right. So hopefully this was helpful, and yeah, I think there can be a lot of opportunities to use a tool like this in other places. Yeah, it might be good to maybe pose the question of their capability to translate in the future. Is certainly something that we need to tackle and solve sort of across the board to make sure that we're reaching more of the world. I think it'll be a bigger topic for the code of conduct that goes beyond just the circle, right? It's certainly something we need to establish, I think, for the community in general. And I think, this is a good pilot in terms of driving at what we do as a circle. And I think that can expand into further discussion for the community itself.
It's neat that, so Peter, you said that Google Translate extension worked on that survey and translated it right into other languages? Can't hear you.
you muted, Peter.
Oops. Yeah, I can pull it back up. We can look at it again. Whoa.
That's neat. I'm gonna start reading everything in other languages.
Such a nerd, Nadia.
Yeah, I am a nerd. That's true.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing my nerd.
I know 2 languages. I know English and nerd.
English and nerd. Yeah.
There's something really wonderful about that, though, because if you're learning a language, to be able to see it in one way and then the other, you just learn so much vocabulary. It's unlike Hocus Pocus. Okay. That is so cool.
And then
Yeah,
it just
yeah.
goes on.
Can you go down to the questions? Okay. Yeah, the questions are translated even.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Super powerful.
I love that you just showed that. Thank you. That's really great. And maybe that's a nice, I don't know. Maybe people, I don't have to read stuff in other languages too much, but I spent lots of time in Germany and needed lots of stuff in German at that time. So this didn't exist back then, but it would be nice to just go around and be able to use that and make recommendations. My point of saying that was I don't have to use that a lot. And so maybe people who have to read in English often or want to read things like that use that all the time. But I bet there's a lot of people also who don't know that's available, which would be a really cool thing to have.
Yeah, like that drop down menu where it says translate to the other language, that would work because it's the either a Google Doc or a Google Sheet. The issue is the survey itself. You need to take this sheet and copy those sentences one by one and put it into the thing for the voting part to happen.
I don't think that's true, Dimitri. I think it will translate it on the fly in real time. Yeah, you don't need to translate each individual.
If it does, that's great. I mean, if that's happening like that, that would be great. Then you don't need to get involved.
Yeah, it's happening right now. You can see all the questions have been translated. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, so it would apply to the
wonder-
entire interface.
I wonder whether it works to like add, like as your if you wanted to add a question, you know, where did I put the actual survey link? Oh, it's in
Yeah,
the chat.
the problem that can happen is that we'll then get input in, let's say,
Right,
Japanese,
in a different language. Oh,
but
it's
then
closed.
but then us as a
You
global
could do the
community
same.
could translate it back to English, right?
Yeah.
And it's not perfect. It is not. But
Well, I think it's a lot more perfect and streamlined than trying to figure out how to translate this into other languages and figure out a poll tool that would serve the same purpose, which I don't think exists, right? The great benefit of this is that we get the community feedback portion.
Yeah.
Right? People can make their own questions. That's phenomenal because they're gonna say things that we haven't thought about. And that's, I think, that's kind of how we work, right? So
yeah, and there's a question that doesn't translate well, from a specific language to English. Potentially we could ask the community, can we get some clarification on this, because it doesn't make sense, or because there definitely will be cases where it's not translating good enough for it to be an understandable statement, but it certainly gives you good clues of at least some of the intent, and it's definitely not perfect or as good as English translation, or a person translation is what I'm trying to say. That can often be better, but even that has its own problems, which I've seen in real life. Translating interfaces into Turkish, for instance, did not bode well, even with human involvement, in certain cases, depending on the translation services or whatever. But cool. All right. I think there's some learning that I think we can certainly do our part in educating the community, maybe on some of these tools as well, which can open the floodgates for more folks to participate.
really good. That's one thing we're full of, is different tools and ideas and stuff, right? I have like 3,000% more things that I use now since being in Catalyst, since like probably my entire life before that. So we're just so rich with great tools from different places and ones we're building, and wow, it really makes it possible. It never lost on me that, in a day's time you speak to people who, if you imagine where they are on the globe compared to you, it's just phenomenal. It's just an incredible thing. So
Yeah.
it's really cool to be able to make it happen, to live in a time where that's possible. So Harris, nice job on this initiative. It's really great to have something coming together and to have the survey and a path forward. So thanks for your work on it.
Cool. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, definitely happy to work with you folks on it, and we'll get something produced, hopefully in the next 3-4 weeks. It'd be great.
So we're shooting for the 18th to do the after town hall.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's a checkpoint for sort of backing our assumptions or the approach and the process, and then ideally having some input that we can start leading into a specific document.
Great. That'll be fun.
Peter, can you
Well,
sign
great.
us up for the 18th?
Was that to Peter? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Peter. Yeah.
Set up so like an agenda.
Sign us up
No.
for an after town hall slot, since
Oh yes,
you're the
for sure.
18th.
I put us in.
Is he the boss?
Not the boss. Just the organizer. For sure. Yeah, I noted it already. So,
Good.
on the list. If someone wants to get me a title for what to call the room and who's going to be the official host, that'll be
Yeah,
great.
just like Catalyst Circle Code of Conduct discussion, and you can put me as the host.
Okay. All right. Let me see.
Yeah, and I echo Nadia's sentiment. Thanks, Harris, for spearheading this and getting it going. It's actually really cool to see 100 people participating who care, who gave their opinion.
Yeah, same here. You know, doing this not just for us, but for the rest of the circle, sort of, you know, C4, C5, etc. I think that's fantastic. So thanks, Harris.
Cool. Awesome. Anything else? Other subjects you guys want to discuss in this working session?
Maybe not this time, but maybe for the next one, if we could start to talk about the election process for V4. If we're not going to do it on idea scale, we need to know so we can, admin team can start to prep for something. But if we're going to do it through idea scale, it's going to completely change how we do stuff. So it would be good to know sooner than later.
Yes, for sure. And since I was the one that had to I did the coordination and all the Google forms in like the voting process for CCV1 and CCV2, or CCV3 and CCV2. Definitely going into CCV4, don't think that's a viable option. Just so much attention on it, and I don't necessarily want to hold that bag of responsibility.
What would you guys think? What do you think, Peter? You just said idea scale, Nori. Is that an idea for
To create
the actual voting?
a new challenge setting where people put their nominations in, and then when we vote, people just vote for whoever they want to be on the circle.
So a challenge is a seat, and then a person becomes a proposal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And potentially that seat, that challenge would come with a budget.
Yeah.
I love it.
And then you could have the conversations and the discussions just like you do on proposals, and then we all vote. And then there's no question. Google Forms don't work, or I didn't get a chance to vote. I couldn't show up.
Why can't we see the results on the same day? It seems pretty arbitrary. Yeah, I don't know.
So so this is for a Fund 9. That's not finishing till September, or so how does that work?
Yeah, so circles,
question.
we're following the funds. So circle B3 is covering 2 funds, 8 and 9. So then at the
Oh my gosh. So I don't get to jump off in July. We're staying till September.
Brutal, guys. Brutal.
Yeah, the fun continues. Yeah. You didn't hear that when you signed up for this?
You know, the last time we had a meeting and we're talking about the when Nori said, like this is when it would have wrapped up. I was like, there should be a clause, like there should be a jump off clause in there, whereby after the 3 months, people that want to jump off can jump off. Well, it was just a joke, but it was a thought that occurred to me in terms of more than one funding cycle.
I have actually a very quick question about, so that's $7,000 we have. I'd like to do some stuff with that. How do I understand? How do I know? Can I just use it for whatever if it's related to the role? I remember in the beginning, people being like, go spend it.
Yep.
So I like to do a few things, but I don't know what the process is other than raising the idea. I actually like to have like maybe a scribe kind of a person to just detail all of our meetings and things like that. Now that I've sort of have the hang of it, that kind of a thing, but also other stuff. What's the process for me saying I would like to use this for this, and is that okay?
Contact the treasury team with your budget and what you want dispersed to who, and they'll do it. And you just need to make it transparent and report on what you're doing with that money. Like Joey's doing subcircles, so is Mercy. Other people haven't touched it much.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, so for the most part, it's handled just like a funded proposal. So you would be working with Chris and some of the other folks to say, hey, I've got this need, I need this much for this purpose, and I'd like to request this much at this time. And, ideally it's split into tranches of some sort, but if you have justification like, hey, I need this much at this time, just make the request and put it in writing. And I think then it's just a discussion.
Treasury team
I
reports.
have a question. I have a question. May I share that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the $7,000 for each of the circle reps, is it like for the 6 months, or is it per 3 months?
It's for the term. I don't know if we have a new proposal, and maybe we do. It may be for the 3 months. We'd have to check.
It was originally just for the 3 months, and I think the intent was that we would put in another proposal in this fund to.
If it was useful, yeah.
I just don't know if that happened because
No, it's happened. The proposal for the rapid funding has been put for this current fund. It's there. So I guess it's been voted on right now. So
Okay.
that's why I wanted to clarify whether the one we've already been allocated is for this past 3 months, the months that we've just completed.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
the funds we have is for the ones we just completed.
But they're not going anywhere, so
Yeah.
until they get spent, so technically you have more than 3 months. But
Right.
that proposal needs to get closed out at some point, so.
Cool.
Great.
Anything else for today?
I think we did it. We're right on time. Look at us.
Nice.
All right. No, it's great working session. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you guys next week.
Sounds
All right,
great.
guys.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.